I absolutely love cabbage. It's one of my favorite vegetables. I never get tired of it, and I'm always looking for new ways to enjoy it. One of the oldest and best ways people have enjoyed cabbage for centuries is in soup. From Europe to Asia, it's been a staple because it's affordable, it feeds a crowd, and turns into something warm and comforting when it simmers low and slow. Today, I'm making my own version with Italian sausage for bold flavor, fresh cabbage for sweetness, and just enough tang to make that broth come alive. It's hearty, it's rustic, it's satisfying, and it's simple enough for any night of the week. For the full ingredient list, check the description box below, but enough talking, let's get cooking. All right, to start off this recipe, let's do our prep. We got to cut up some vegetables, so we're going to start with the cabbage. Here, I'm starting with a cabbage that I've already been chipping away at because we're not going to use the whole cabbage. We're just going to use some of it. And cabbages can come in all different sizes. They can be really big, they can be small. So instead of telling you that we're going to use like a half a cabbage, I'm going to show you how much I like to cut up for this recipe. When I'm cutting it up, I'm trying to cut it really thin and I'm going to chop it up a little bit. So I'll start any way on the cabbage, doesn't really matter. I've already cut off like this wedge, and now I'll just chop down, and I'm trying to chop it relatively thin. I would say probably like less than like a 1/4 inch thick. Because I want this to like really like melt in the soup. I don't want big chunky pieces of cabbage. It might have a little bit of crispness, but I'm trying to cut the cabbage relatively thin. And the good part about making soup is that you can hide all parts of the cabbage inside the soup. So we're gonna use as much of it as possible. I don't even think I need to cut more than this because this looks like enough cabbage, but instead of keeping it really long, I'm gonna go this way on the cabbage, the other way, so perpendicular to the cuts I just made, just to cut it down a little bit. This is probably, I don't know, 3-4 cups of cabbage, something like that, and that's probably like enough for this soup. And this is also the second time that I've made this recipe with this piece of cabbage, and you can see I still got a decent amount left, and this cabbage I think was less than like $3. I love cabbage because of how good it tastes. It's one of the most economical vegetables going right now, so in these tough economic times, cabbage is going to be a really good friend to us. Next up, we got an onion going in there. These are some of the usual suspects that go inside of a soup. I don't know if you can even make soup without an onion. I think every soup in existence starts with onions. So for this onion, we're gonna cut it pretty small. We're gonna put a small dice on it. We're gonna cut 2 times horizontal, and we're gonna put some vertical slices through it and then chop down. When I'm making stuff that I call a soup, I'm always thinking about what is the size of the food that's going into the final dish. Because soup, I want it to all eat on one spoon and very uniformly. So you want almost a little bit of everything on one bite. If it starts to get a little chunky, that's really not soup, that's probably like more of like a stew. So as I cut all my vegetables, I'm trying to cut it small enough that I'm thinking about how is this soup gonna eat? And I don't want it to be too large. A lot of times when I get soup and it's made, not great, the size of what goes inside the soup is a little large and then it eats a little clunkily. You try to put it all on one bite and you really just get one bite of like one thing. When I'm cutting up all my vegetables for my soup, fine, dainty. Look how small that little piece of onion is. That's a very nice sized piece of onion for soup. Because I don't just like show recipes, I like to show people how it's done. I think there's way too much cooking content out there right now that just shows recipes and people are missing the real essence of cooking, like how to cut stuff, why to cut stuff. Because if you know those things, then you don't need to lean on recipes so much. So next up, we got some carrots, and I'm showing these carrots because these carrots are probably maybe like a month or 2 old that have been inside the fridge. These carrots, they're a little slimy. This one's got a little gross end right here, but that's okay because once we cut these up, we give them a peel. The inside of the carrot is good and useful, and that's how you want to use produce. You got to stop throwing good usable produce in the garbage just because it looks a little weird. Let's trim off the end off of this one. We'll trim the end off of this. We'll get rid of these little carrot plants on the top, and now we'll take our trusty peeler and peel these carrots down. And now look at these carrots. They look just as good as a brand new, nice and shiny carrot. So stop throwing your funky looking vegetables in the garbage. You should check to see if they are good before you give them a toss, because sometimes just a little trim and a little peel and they're good as new. So to cut our carrots, I'll start on one end and I'll cleaver down all the way through the carrot and try to cut it loosely in half this way. And then I'll do the same thing going back this way. And if I want to, because if I cut that down, I still think this is gonna be a little large, I'll actually put an additional cut all the way through. So I'll hold my knife on a little bit of an angle. I'll make sure that my fingers are out of the way, and then I'll just cleaver down through. Because now when I cut this carrot up, it won't be as large as this large piece. And again, I'm always thinking about how is this soup gonna eat? Now we've got those trimmed down as much as we can. Now I'll chop all the way down and we'll get our nice small little carrot pieces. Now to hearty the soup up a bit, we're gonna add some potatoes. So I'm gonna start cutting these potatoes similar to how I cut the carrots, and I'm gonna think about why do I wanna make the potato so I don't get these just like big chunks of potato. Probably wanna cut the potatoes just like a little bit bigger, maybe like 3/4 of an inch, so it tenderizes but doesn't fall apart and it's large enough. So I'll probably cut down this potato into like 3 sections right here, and then I'll handle each section individually, where I'll cut this down into 2 additional pieces and then cut this a little sideways. Do the same thing here. So I'll cut this potato into 3 sections, I'll turn it sideways, and then I'll cut it. I'm trying to get the potato into probably smaller than 1 inch cube. And also, I didn't mention the type of potato we're gonna use here is a Yukon Gold potato. You can use basically any potato. Red potatoes would work well, some of the other waxy potatoes, maybe even like your little baby potatoes. Maybe a russet might get a little slimy inside there, because like when that gets cooked down, because of the high starch content, it'll get a little like starchy and kind of like fall apart. These tend to hold their shape a little bit better. So we're gonna go with any potato in here. Yukon Gold or a red potato would work really well too. The last thing we gotta prep is some garlic. This wouldn't be a Chef Ange recipe if garlic wasn't represented in a large way. Here I got 2 types of garlic. So recently, I have friends that have a small farm, and they've been giving me some of this hard neck garlic that I find is absolutely wonderful compared to this regular like supermarket garlic. It's a little harder to peel, but the flavor that comes out of this garlic is much more defined and better. Not that this garlic doesn't taste like anything, this just tastes way better. So they're a little harder to peel, and I find that some of my garlic peeling strategies are a little rough around this one, because if I try to do the garlic clove pinch, I gotta pinch really hard before I crack the outside of it. It's a way hardier version of garlic, but I can tell you this, it's worth the extra effort it takes me to peel, because the flavor in it is great. And you can see that this garlic has a hard like wood stem that goes like right through the center of it. That's how you know that it's this hard neck garlic, and I think that's why they call it hard neck. So now to trim the garlic, I'm gonna trim off the root end of the garlic, because those root ends can get a little woody and they really don't soften up. And especially this garlic, it's definitely a hardier version of garlic, so this would probably just like be like wood no matter how long you cooked it. And now from here, I'm gonna smash each clove, and I'll keep running my knife through till we get a nice mince on it. And let me know in the comments section if you've ever used hard neck garlic before and compared it to the regular stuff, because again, my friends, they ruined me with that one, because now I just can't buy any garlic. I'm now a garlic snob, and I didn't even think garlic was something to be snobby about other than how much you put inside. This garlic tastes fantastic, and even after chopping it, it smells fantastic. So now that our prep's all over, let's head over to the stove and start building the soup. So I got this large sauce pot or soup pot, whatever you want to call it, stock pot, hot over like a medium-ish heat. The first step to building layers in this soup is browning this Italian sausage. If you wanted to make this all veggie, you could just swap out some of like the stock stuff that you're going to see in a second for veggie stuff. But I think the sausage really makes this a nice soup. I want this soup to eat like a full meal. I don't know if you've ever seen the Seinfeld episode where Jerry takes the guy out to lunch and he orders soup and it's not like a full meal. I want this soup to be the opposite of that. I want someone to eat this soup and go, wow, that was delicious, and it ate like a whole meal, heartily. It's got sausage in it. We put the potatoes in there, and it's all just gonna bump up that nice cabbage that we're gonna put in. So to this pot, I'm gonna add a little bit of olive oil, and now I'm gonna add the sausage, and I'm gonna try to crumble it a little bit by hand. So when I throw it in, I do a little less work breaking it up. I'm just taking the sausage out, and I'm trying to like break it up by hand as best as I can as I'm throwing it in. As I was taking a look at a lot of cabbage soup recipes, the meat that they usually had in there was like kielbasa, because a lot of soup recipes are like Polish in tradition, or they would put like bacon in there. I wanted to go a little different route and make this recipe a little bit of my own, so I went Italian sausage for the meat, which is one of my favorite backup meat ingredients. And we're trying to get like nice browning on the outside of the sausage, and at the same time chop it up so it's spread throughout the soup. Here we want like no like big gigantic chunks of sausage. And I'm just gonna use this wooden spoon to break up any of like the large chunks. And if it doesn't break up super evenly, like that's okay too, because we want it to be like kind of rustic. This is a rustic soup by definition. This is poor people soup, and poor people can't be too particular about their ingredients. So once I've gotten the sausage browned and broken up a little bit, I'm just gonna let it cook just a little bit more to see if I can get like a little bit more browning on it. Because this is a step that you can't replace. You know, part of making good soup is layering in the flavor. So as we brown this sausage, we're adding some flavor to the outside of the sausage, we're adding some flavor to the outside of the, or the bottom of the pan that we're gonna reclaim when we put everything else in there. And that's really what makes a great soup, is all those layers of flavors. And I also find when I do this like crumbled sausage version, it releases a lot of that sausage flavor into the soup, as opposed to like links that I would then like slice up and put in the soup. Not only does the links get a little bit big, but I don't think it releases that sausage flavor as much, and we really want that flavor in that soup. So this is brown enough. So now I'm gonna take a slotted spoon and I'll remove this brown sausage into a bowl. Now that I've got the sausage out of the pot, to that same pot, I'm gonna add a little bit more olive oil to the sausage fat that's already in there. And now we're gonna throw in our onions and our carrots. These are the two vegetables that are gonna take the longest to cook, so we wanna get them in first. Onions and carrots don't have a tendency to burn. You can put them in there and they'll only get more flavorful. We're gonna let these cook over a medium heat, stirring them occasionally for a couple of minutes till we see the onions really start to soften and become translucent. And if at any point the pot's looking a little dry, don't be afraid to add just a touch of oil, because remember, oil cooks and it stops stuff from burning. You don't have to put too much, but if it doesn't have enough, stuff's gonna burn and not cook. So once I see the onions have softened up after a few minutes and they look a little translucent and they start to give off their moisture, I'm gonna add the garlic. You always want to add your garlic later, because garlic has a tendency to burn if you put it in with like the onions and the carrots, and burnt garlic is just not very flavorful. So delay putting in that garlic. And the garlic also doesn't have to cook long, because one, garlic just doesn't need to cook long, and two, we cut it up much more finely than the rest of the stuff. So it'll release its flavor like really fast. And the more you mince it, the more it releases that flavor, but the more it has a tendency to burn. And generally the minced garlic, you only have to cook it for like 30 seconds or like a minute, because once it starts releasing the flavor, the next step is it's gonna burn. Once I can smell the garlic, now I'm gonna add my tomato paste. So I'll put a couple of tablespoons of that in there. I like the stuff in the tube because it sits a little bit better than the stuff in the can. But when you get down towards the end, this stuff is hard to get out. Whoever works out there for tomato paste factory, you got to start to figure out, how do we engineer tomato paste that can go in some type of reusable container like this that's not a can, but is way easier to get out at the end, because this sucks at the end. And remember, tomato paste is a raw tomato ingredient, so it's got to be cooked. And what I like to do is mix it into like this cooked onion, carrot, and garlic mixture. And I'm just trying to like mix it around. And as it's mixing, it's in this hot pot, so it's like cooking a little bit and removing some of that like raw flavor. And again, adding additional flavors. That's why we're making the soup this way, layer by layer, and not just dumping everything in a crock pot. Like, that is a way to make a soup, but it ain't gonna be as good as this one. There's only so many shortcuts you can take before stuff starts not being the best end product. So once that cooks a little bit, we're gonna add a little salt, some fresh ground black pepper, and now we're gonna put about a half a teaspoon of some smoked paprika. I love putting smoked paprika inside this soup because it adds a really nice smoky element that, unless you're cooking this soup over an open fire, you're not getting that. And I like to put it in now because I like to toast the spices a little bit. It helps bring out the flavors a little bit more. And it's all these like little things, the order in which you do it, that matter a lot to the end product of this wonderful soup. So now from here, we're gonna add our liquid base. Here we're gonna go with some low sodium chicken broth. And I'm not against boxed broths and stocks. For as much stock and broth that I use, I can't keep up with making it myself. So thank you for all the people who are making good broths here. This is Pacific Foods. This is my go-to broth that I use most of the time. And I tend to use the low sodium version because I like to manipulate how much salt I put in. You can always add more, you can't take out any. So when I'm using broth, I like to use the low sodium version. So if I need to add something that has salt in it, I'm less likely to go overboard. So now from here, I'm gonna add my potatoes, a little white wine vinegar for some acidity. It's gonna help bump up the flavors in here. Now we're gonna put a sprinkle of some fresh dried oregano out of my mom's garden. And now we're gonna put in a little bouillon paste. This is the chicken bouillon paste from Better Than Bouillon. This is also a reduced sodium version. Again, I like to control how much salt I'm putting in because this got salt in it, the stock's got salt in it. We wanna make sure that we're not like layering in too much salt because then it gets overly salty and again, we can't take it out. And this stuff, you can't make great soup with this all by itself, but if you make a great soup and then you add this, that elevates it to an awesome soup because this is just a concentrated flavor paste. It's not cheating, but it definitely helps. So now we're gonna put in our shredded cabbage. And now we're gonna put in a secondary cabbage ingredient. So this is some sauerkraut. So I'm just gonna dump the whole jar, everything right in there. If I can get it open. So now I'm gonna add 2 bay leaves into the soup. Anytime we're cooking anything for a little bit of time on the stove and it's like a soup or a stew, very likely we're throwing some bay leaves in there. But you always have to remember how many you put in because you gotta take them out. Let's go ahead and throw those in there, give them a mix in. So now I'm gonna bring this up to a boil, reduce it down to a simmer, and let it simmer for about 30 minutes. So I just checked the soup after 30 minutes. The carrots and the potatoes still have a little bit more to go, so we're gonna leave it there for another 10 minutes or so, and we'll check, we'll probably get there then. And so when I'm giving you times for stuff, times are giving us just a general idea of how long stuff takes. That's why you gotta check when you're cooking, because if something takes 30 minutes in here, it might take 40 minutes outside of here. I don't know, so that's why it's important to check your food, and the 2 things you definitely wanna check in there that are gonna take the longest are gonna be the carrots and the potatoes. But that just gives us a little time to chop up some of this fresh dill. One of the key ingredients that I saw in a lot of like the Slavic soups was finishing it with some fresh dill. Dill is really potent, but the flavor is so fantastic. So I'm gonna use my 3 fingers to remove the leaves just like we do on parsley. So right up the stem, just pull everything off. None of the big stuff in there, just the fine little leaves. And again, dill is very potent, so you don't want to use too much and really, overpower the other flavors inside the soup. So that's probably enough. And now I'm just going to take my knife and give it a nice fine chop. And with the dill, we don't have to go crazy because it's already pretty small. So 1 or 2 passes through this and this is good. And I don't know, this is probably like a little bit more than a tablespoon of chopped dill. You can use the dried stuff too. I've used that before in a pinch, but the fresh is way better. Not only does it give that wonderful flavor, put in fresh stuff in a soup, it gives it that really nice pop of color and lets people know that this soup is fresh, delicious, and was made with love. So after about 45 minutes on the stove, the carrots and the potatoes softened up enough. I thought it was gonna take 30, took a little bit more, but that's all right. Now we're gonna add that fresh dill and the soup is really gonna come alive. This is one of my favorite parts of cooking, is adding like the fresh green stuff into the soup or the stew. Because once that goes in there and then you give it a little mix and it like looks like so much more finished. And the dill is gonna release its flavor into the soup rather quickly. Just the heat of the soup itself is enough to warm this up. And that sausage that we cooked before, gotta get added right back in. Remember, we fully cooked this, so we don't need to cook it any further than that. And sausage, when you simmer it in a soup for too long, it tends to dry out a little bit and then it gets like a little too crumbly. So I like to just put it all back in at the end. And we'll pull out those bay leaves if we can find them. I saw one before, I should have pulled it out when I saw it. Now I like to let this soup sit for like about 5 to 10 minutes to let it cool down. I don't like soup like when it's super hot. You always want to let it cool down a little bit because I think it has this like optimal range of like, it's too hot and it loses flavor. It's too cold and it's too bland. It's got this like middle room. So once it sits, the sausage warms up a little bit, the dill is releasing the flavors and all the other flavors are mellowing out, and that's when the soup is best. So let's let this sit for a little bit and then we're gonna plate this and try it. So let's get a nice big ladle of this soup. And look how hearty this soup is. You know, I said I wanted this soup to eat like a meal, and like, look, the cabbage, the potatoes, the carrots. This looks so fantastic. I think I might have went a little heavy on the sausage, but I'm not mad about that. And a nice spoonful of broth right on top. Before I eat this soup, there's two things that I like to do. The first thing is I like to add just a little bit fresh dill. Like I said, I like the dill very, very much. So if we put a little bit more on there, not only the color's gonna pop, but the flavor of the dill's really gonna shine. So a little fresh dill right on top. I like to throw in a spoonful of some 0% Greek yogurt or some sour cream. You could go either way. I tend to lean towards the Greek yogurt a little bit just because it's got a little bit more protein and a little less calories. So let's put a spoonful of this in here. You know, how amazing does this soup look? This soup smells fantastic. I am so excited to eat it. So I'm gonna take the Greek yogurt and give that just a little mix into the soup. I love how it starts to like make it like all like creamy. And now let's see if we can get a little bit of everything on one bite. So the cabbage, the potato, some of the sausage, the Greek yogurt that we just put in. This is gonna be an epic bite. Well, mission accomplished, because this soup is fantastic and it eats so heartily. I am super satisfied after having that. This ain't no appetizer. The sausage, the potatoes, and the cabbage, which are generally thought of as like, I guess, like poor people food. But let's put some respect on the name of cabbage, because this isn't poor people food. This is fantastic. I love that the Italian sausage got fennel in it. That's what gives Italian sausage a lot of flavor. And then the dill. The dill and fennel are kind of like related and yet complementary. This tastes so good, and every time I eat it and I take a bite, the flavors just keep going and going and going and going. It's got layers. When I like eating my vegetables, I like there to be like a little bit, not crunch, but it's gotta have some texture to it. If you did this soup for like 2 hours, everything would be like way too mushy and it really wouldn't eat well. I can tell you that this soup is gonna be on a repeat all winter long. This soup was absolutely fantastic. If you like this recipe, or if you make this recipe, let me know in the comment section what you thought about the video, what you thought about the recipe, and let me know how your dishes come out at home. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, drop a like on this video, drop me a comment, let me know where you're from. And if you are into delicious and easy soups, check out my easy chicken soup recipe. It doesn't take all day long, but it tastes just like it did, and I'll see you there. Thanks.